The tallest building ever intentionally torn down on Earth was the Singer Building, demolished 3 years after New York passed a law to stop exactly this. 47 stories, Beaux-Arts, a copper crown. The Singer stood at 149 Broadway from 1908 to 1968, and the agency created to save it never even formally considered the case. It was 612 feet of red brick and bluestone, capped with a mansard tower transplanted from Paris. For 1 year in 1908, it was the tallest structure in the world. For 60 years after, a cathedral of commerce. Then in 1967, the wrecking crews arrived. Nobody stopped them. Not the city, not the public, not the Landmarks Preservation Commission, created in 1965 to prevent exactly this. The man who built it had warned us. Ernest Flagg was born in 1857 and trained at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. He came home convinced that American cities were doing it wrong. In 1913, testifying before New York's Heights of Buildings Commission, Flagg said it was, quote, absolutely incomprehensible how anyone can prefer the wild disorder of the American city to the dignified, restrained, and artistic arrangement of the European one. He proposed something radical for 1913, limit a building's bulk to the width of the street, and only let towers rise unrestricted on a quarter of the lot. That proposal became the spine of the 1916 zoning resolution, the law that gave New York its setback skyline. Flagg didn't just design buildings, he designed the rules buildings had to follow, and then the Singer Manufacturing Company asked him to build something that would test those rules. Singer wasn't a real estate company, it was a sewing machine empire, the iPhone of the 19th century, in nearly every middle-class American home. By the 1890s, Isaac Singer's company wanted a headquarters that announced its dominance to the world. They hired Flagg in 1897. He worked on the project in phases for 11 years. The result, completed in May 1908, was a 47-story tower at the corner of Broadway and Liberty Street, and on the day it opened, it was the tallest building in the world. It surpassed Philadelphia City Hall. It bested its New York predecessor, the Park Row Building, by 226 feet. The Singer Tower wasn't just tall, it was a corporate cathedral, with red brick walls, bluestone trim, and a slender mansard tower that looked transplanted from a Parisian boulevard, and it would only hold the record for 1 year. In 1909, the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company finished its tower at Madison Square. At 700 feet, it stole the world's tallest title from Singer almost immediately. Flagg's masterpiece had reigned for barely 13 months. But losing the Height crown didn't matter. What mattered was what the Singer Building represented. Its lobby, faced in marble and bronze, looked like the nave of a small cathedral. Its mansard tower was a deliberate refusal of the boxy commercial architecture already creeping over lower Manhattan. Flagg had built proof, physical, visible, 612 feet of proof, that a skyscraper could be ornate, restrained, and beautiful at the same time. For 60 years that proof stood at 149 Broadway. Then in 1958 the Singer Manufacturing Company sold its tower. The buyer was a steel company. And steel companies don't care about mansards. Across the city, on October 28, 1963, demolition began on the original Pennsylvania station. McKim, Mead & White's pink granite masterpiece, gone for an office tower and an arena. The protests came too late. The building came down anyway. But Penn Station's loss did one thing the building itself could not. It lit a fuse. In April 1965, Mayor Robert Wagner signed the New York City Landmarks Law. The Landmarks Preservation Commission was created, given the legal power to designate buildings as protected, to block demolitions, to do what nobody had been able to do for Penn Station. New York had finally written down the rules. The ink was barely dry, and just 2 years later, the city's most famous Beaux-Arts skyscraper went up for sale to the highest bidder, a bidder that had no interest in preservation at all. U.S. Steel was the largest steel producer in the world, and in 1964 it bought the Singer Building site. The plan was straightforward: demolish the tower, combine the lot with the neighboring city investing building, and put up something modern, something efficient, something with several times more office space than Flagg's narrow Beaux-Arts shaft could ever provide. Demolition began in 1967. By then, the Landmarks Preservation Commission was 2 years old. Its executive director, Alan Burnham, made a public statement that August. Saving the Singer Building, he explained, would require either finding a new buyer or having the city acquire the property itself. There was no buyer. There was no city budget. U.S. Steel had already begun. The LPC, the body created to stop exactly this, never even formally considered designating the Singer Building. The Wrecking Ball did the considering. Architectural Forum magazine led what protest there was. Preservationists wrote letters. Architectural critics published obituaries while the building was still partly standing. But there was no picket line at 149 Broadway. No celebrity activists, no Jackie Kennedy moment the way she had stood for Grand Central 2 years later. The Singer Building came down quietly, floor by floor, through 1968 and into 1969. By the time the dust settled, the tallest building ever intentionally demolished anywhere on Earth was gone. That record would stand for 51 years, until J.P. Morgan Chase took down 270 Park Avenue in 2019. But in 1968, Singer was the record, and in its place U.S. Steel commissioned Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, the kings of corporate modernism, to build something that would announce a different kind of empire entirely. What rose on the site was One Liberty Plaza, 743 feet, 54 stories, completed in 1973. It was taller than the Singer Building had ever been, and on paper that's an upgrade. On the street it is something else. One Liberty Plaza is a black steel and glass slab. There is no mansard. There is no copper crown. There is no ornament. Its exterior is dominated by exposed structural beams, painted matte black, repeated floor after floor for 54 stories. It looks, intentionally, like the steel that U.S. Steel sold. The replacement gave Lower Manhattan several times the rentable square footage of the Singer Tower. It also marked, in the words of architectural historians, the pivotal shift from ornate Beaux-Arts landmarks to modernist international-style towers. The math worked. The skyline didn't. Ernest Flagg, who had died in 1947, was no longer around to testify, but one of his Singer buildings was still standing 5 blocks north. There is one Flagg Singer building still standing, not the famous one. 5 blocks north, at 561 Broadway in Soho, a smaller cast-iron and terracotta loft survives, the Little Singer Building, finished in 1903. It was converted to a residential and commercial cooperative in 1979 and restored in 2008, with a glass and ironwork canopy recreated from Flagg's original drawings. It is beautiful. It is 12 stories, and it is what New York chose to keep. The 47-story masterpiece at 149 Broadway, the corporate cathedral, the tallest building in the world for one shining year, the tallest ever demolished for the next half-century. That one the city let go. What stands on the site today is 743 feet of black steel that almost nobody walking past it could name. Singer Building should have survived. The law existed. The commission existed. The protests existed. None of it was enough. U.S. Steel moved first, the city had no buyer, and the Landmarks Preservation Commission decided the fight wasn't winnable. Penn Station taught New York to write the law. The Singer Building taught New York that a law you don't enforce is not a law. It's a wish. The space at 149 Broadway is occupied now by 743 feet of black steel that does its job efficiently and ignores everyone walking past it. Singer's record, tallest building ever intentionally demolished, held for 51 years, until J.P. Morgan took down 270 Park Avenue in 2019. One copper crown, 60 years standing. One law, that didn't save it. If you want to keep walking through the buildings America chose to forget, the obituary of Main Street itself, subscribe. There are more chapters coming.